I'm the editor, creator, and producer of what you're watching right now, Blade Talk. If you are new here, welcome, and you found this presentation helpful and informative, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Do me an even greater favor and subscribe to my channel. I always appreciate all the support that I am given. So I wanted to go over why I chose conservative Judaism, and more importantly, why I left Orthodox Judaism. So if you're interested, let's hit that intro and let's begin. Alright, so before we begin, a little about me. I grew up in Wisconsin. I was born in a Jewish community. I attended Beth Yehuda. And my grandparents and great grandparents and great great grandparents actually migrated here from North Africa, Egypt, and Morocco to be more specific. So I'm a descendant of Sephardic Jews. So as I grew up in the Orthodox movement and lived the Orthodox lifestyle, I joined the military at 17. And when I was in basic training, I had many religious discussions. I even met with priests, pastors, imams, different rabbis, etc. I search for the truth. And before I get into the reasons I left Orthodox Judaism in favor of the conservative movement, I want to list two caveats. One is, this is by no means a recommendation on what you should do. Okay? This is based off my experience, my knowledge, and my perception. And two, this is not a knock on Orthodox Judaism. I find Orthodox Judaism an amazing way to live your life. The only way that I keep kashrut now is because of the Orthodox Union, the literature that they put out, the teachings that they give. I have known many Orthodox rabbis that are amazing, and I learned so much from them. So this is not a knock on the Orthodox movement. This is simply my explanation on why I chose to leave the Orthodox movement in favor of the conservative movement. So the first reason I left Orthodoxy is my views on women. I'm an egalitarian. I believe that women can read the Torah, the Talmud, and even become rabbis in their own right, and it doesn't impede on their duties of being a wife and mother. In the Orthodox movement, you will find a variety of interpretations. While certain restrictions may limit what a female clergy could do on the bema and would, in practice, prevent being a pulpit rabbi, it is worth noting that not all rabbis are pulpit rabbis. There is a social and cultural aversion to applying the label rabbi to women in many, if not most, Orthodox communities. However, this is not due to Halakha. In some, albeit not many, modern Orthodox communities, there is acceptance of women in non-pulpit clergy roles. However, the term maharat rather than rabbi is used there. The conservative movement is an egalitarian movement with women rabbis while also being dedicated to halakhic observance. The model of conservative Judaism is balancing modernity with tradition and reinterpreting the law in a modern context, but subject to and bounded by halakha and the halakhic process. To be clear, there is no Jewish law that prohibits a female rabbi, and thus there is really no good reason to disallow it. To me, telling women that they are excluded from certain mitzvot or becoming a rabbi because they have more important things to do, like taking care of the household and kids, is a patronizing rationale that has been used by men for thousands of years to keep men in power. Thankfully now, even in the Orthodox movement, there are now Orthodox schools that teach women Talmud. Given that such positions raised in the context of discussions of whether women are capable of becoming rabbis are really just an excuse to justify a reluctance to and fear of change and don't really have a valid halakhic basis. That being said, this view of women being given to frivolity and not as capable of serious religious study remains a problem in the Orthodox world and is another obstacle. This is not to mention that women can't divorce their husbands in the Orthodox community. Don't get me wrong, I am pro life. I do believe that a man is the head of the household, and I believe in gender roles. Men are the protectors and providers, and women are the educators and nurturers. That said, I see evidence in the Torah itself that women are more than just wives and mothers. Devorah was a judge at her time and a prophetess. The daughters of Zelophehad confronted Moses and God about inheritance. I believe in giving women the choice and don't believe that just because she is a wife and a mother, she can't do anything else. Someone can wear many hats and shouldn't be restricted. I believe that everyone should have the opportunity to achieve greatness. The second reason that I left Orthodox Judaism is that I reject the idea that the more primitive you are, the more religious you are. Orthodox Judaism, in my experience, is afraid of change. So it reacts to modernity out of fear instead of reason. Many Orthodox circles believe that when times change and make them feel insecure, the best thing that they can do is go back to the old way of doing things. The issue is that once you see modernity, you can't unsee it. So, what happens is that many in the Orthodox view believe that they are doing the same things that our ancestors did as if that is the goal. I have always felt that it is our job to allow Judaism to evolve as it always has. Think about it. What does a parent always want for their children? To be better and surpass them in knowledge and wisdom. It should be about taking what your parents taught you and using it as a guide to maneuver the effects of modernity. Failure to do this as a parent will cause you to raise your children in a world that doesn't exist anymore. This is how I view Orthodox Judaism. The world is constantly changing, whether we like it or not, and there is no reverse button on life. Take electricity, for example. Orthodox Judaism considers the active use of electricity forbidden and is based on an extension of the prohibition on lighting a fire. When electricity became a thing, the rabbis discussed how to approach it from the perspective of Jewish law. The majority of rabbis converged on the opinion that electricity was functionally the same as fire and therefore be subject to the same laws. A minority disagreed, but the subtleties of Jewish law tends to be based on the majority rabbinic opinion. The conservative movement disagrees with the Orthodox opinion and considers the use of electricity for things like lighting completely acceptable. Jewish law has to be able to adapt to a changing world, and rabbis always discuss how to apply Torah law to unprecedented situations. There are always different opinions, and although sometimes several opinions are considered valid for practical purposes, majority opinion tends to prevail in Orthodox Judaism. Although on some issues, different rulings may be seen as equally valid, and Orthodox Jews follow whichever argument seems more convincing to them. In non Orthodox Judaism, consensus is not an issue, and multiple opinions coexist readily with people deciding for themselves how to proceed. This is also true in practice among the Orthodox, but there is a greater commitment to following rabbinic majority opinion on matters that are potentially open to interpretation. My belief is that conservative Judaism has the right idea. It allows you to decide what is best for you, as it admits that no one has the authority right now to decide on the matter. It provides arguments for and against and let you determine and act based on your own interpretation. This is the way the Talmud is as well. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against following the consensus, as we need to be unified in some things. However, when you read the Talmud, the rabbis of it were very careful not to mix up Torah commands with rabbinic commands. Judaism teaches that we are to be strict on Torah commands and lenient on rabbinic commands. In Orthodox Judaism, they put much emphasis on rabbis having authority, and this is because before the Jewish emancipation, rabbis were more than just your teachers. These were doctors, lawyers, political figures, etc. They quite literally had control of your life in certain aspects. It worked for the times we were in, but once Jewish emancipation happened and Jews were able to have equal rights, many Jews wanted to do Jewish their own way or abandon it altogether. In response to this, the Reform tried to make concessions to keep Jews Jewish, and the Orthodox became more strict than it had ever been. Both responded to the times that were changing in their own ways. I reject the notion that reform was an assimilationist movement. It was an anti assimilationist movement. People were leaving Judaism in droves. Reform tried to save it by making concessions. Orthodox responded by being more exclusive than it had ever been. They created a bubble around themselves and hid from the outside world. My biggest issue with that is, how are you being a light unto the nations, as Jews are called to do, if you are choosing to hide that light? It should be our job to spread the Torah and morality to the world. The third reason I left Orthodoxy is in the area of Halakha, or Jewish law. The Orthodox movement believes that Halakha is binding and cannot change. I reject this premise. It felt as though the movement was trying to freeze Judaism in time by doing this. As I stated, I have always felt that Judaism is an evolving thing and has always been thus. Times change, and when times change, we must see those changes through the lens of the law to best preserve our traditions. I think conservative Judaism does a fantastic job at engaging modernity through a halakhic lens. Our interpretations and ideas should grow the more we understand about science, humanity, technology, etc. We must learn about the amazing halakhic decisions that our ancestors came to and expound upon it with the knowledge and wisdom we have now. I agree that our values and principles shouldn't change, nor should we add or take away from the Torah. But it is our job to figure out how to apply halakhic decisions to our lives. Our sages were brilliant for the times they were living in, and it is up to us to decipher what they said and how to apply it to our daily lives. I always give the example of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. because most know him. He stated he had a dream that black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. It was a beautiful dream at his time. Today, it isn't uncommon to see black and white individuals holding hands, talking to each other, befriending each other, and even marrying each other. So it is our job to find out, how can I adhere to his dream and apply it to my daily life? Dr. King lived in a generation and in a world that doesn't exist to me. That is how I view our sages. The Rambam is one of the most brilliant minds in Jewish theology. And yet, because of his environment living in a Muslim occupied land, some of the things he stated I can't agree with. He stated if the wife refuses to do any of the legally obligated housework for her husband, the Rambam stated that the courts may force her to submit by hitting her with a rod. If the husband and wife present different claims in regard to her behavior, the court must appoint someone to stay with them and witness the actual dynamic. Of course, I disagree with harming a woman in any capacity as a husband, but we must take into account that the Rambam was living in a Muslim country. How much did this influence some of his conclusions? We have to be aware that sometimes the environment we are in can shape our understanding and draw us to certain conclusions. This is why I feel Halakha must evolve. What was once very helpful to the Jewish community, for example, living under a chief rabbi while we were being segregated and discriminated against, now may actually be harmful to the Jewish community by preventing us from learning about the environment around us. The fourth reason that I left Orthodox Judaism is because I am more of a rational Jew. I don't believe in the mystical elements of Judaism. This is aimed more towards Hasidic Judaism, but many streams of Orthodox believe in these mystical elements. I don't believe in the Jewish soul, as I believe that makes God sound bigoted. Many elements of Orthodox Judaism contain mystical ideas from the Zohar or the Kabbalah. In Torah, we see the commandments are here to benefit the nation, to keep us progressing in an ethical manner, but within the nationalistic mindset. In other words, the laws and the practices were pragmatic and practical. The notion of the spiritual was very minimal before the era of the Tanaim. Now, the Kabbalistic movement introduced fatalism. What I mean by that is this notion that everything is predetermined and therefore inevitable. It doesn't take much to realize that a nation within its border, i.e., Israel, could not have progressed under this ideology. The practical and rational message in Torah regarding sin, exile, and ultimately redemption is that it's in all of our hands. In other words, we get good because we do good. We are punished because we did evil. Jewish mysticism loses sight of the practical and national mission of the Jewish people and personalizes everything down to its most irrational component. That is the notion of the Jewish soul. I don't need the spiritual meaning or the mystical elements of Judaism. I believe our job as a nation is to defeat evil, real evil, not the metaphysical evil. The way we do this is by adhering to God's commands and making this world a better place. Kabbalists reject this notion and state the only reason to do good is to, as they put it, gather the sparks. They believe that during creation, God Himself had to limit Himself in order to allow independent realms to exist, thus creating what is known as halal hapanui, or a vacant space. They then teach that God created vessels in that empty space, and when God poured His light into those vessels weren't strong enough to hold God's power and God's light, so they ultimately shattered. The job of the Jew in the Kabbalistic realm is in the process of gathering sparks of God's light that were carried down with the shards of those shattered vessels. Confused yet? Yeah, me too. None of this exists in the Torah at all. The way you do good is by keeping God's law. This is how we separate and elevate the man from the animal, which would lead us to believe that it doesn't really matter who does the good. And I agree with the Torah on that notion, that it doesn't really matter what pedigree he or she comes from. The Kabbalists teach that it has to be the Jew by blood. He is the one that must actually keep the mitzvot in order to repair the world. This is why they teach that if someone happens to convert to Judaism, it is because they were Jewish all along. They have a Jewish soul and are just reincarnated from a previous Jewish life. I reject this premise because it strips one of choice. What made Abraham, Moses, Jacob, King David, etc. amazing individuals was because of the choices they made and not what kind of soul they had. I think the notion of the Jewish soul makes God seem bigoted. The idea that the soul of the Jew has a purpose and is charged with gathering divine sparks, while the Gentile soul is akin to an animal's soul. They are instructed to do the bare minimum and follow the basic 7 laws of morality. So many Orthodox men recite a prayer every morning that says things like, "Thank God He didn't make me a woman," and "Thank God He didn't make me a Gentile," etc., etc. Now, many rabbis try to emphasize that it is not meant to put down women or Gentiles, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this is not in the Torah and it sounds horrible. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are, not the soul you have or the gender you are. God gave His Torah, and if anyone accepts them and tries hard to do them, they are classified as Jews in my eyes. They are trying to make the world a better place, and there will be many more if we didn't have some Jews saying they don't have a Jewish soul or discouraging them from being Jewish. It has also had a counter result because now all you've done is created more secular Jews. If you tell Jews that they are special because they have a Jewish soul and they came to earth through a Jewish woman, then many aren't going to be willing to keep the mitzvot. Why? Because you're telling them that they are special regardless because of the way they came to earth and because of their soul. This is the same ideology that Christians have. Christians believe that Jesus died for the sins of the world, so there are many secularized Christians that don't feel they need to go to church or adhere to religious rituals. If you are telling Jews that they are already special because of their soul, what is the reason to keep kashrut, keep Shabbos? It creates this superiority complex in people that I am better than you just because of how I was brought into this world. To me, there is no difference between someone born Jewish and someone who converted. A Jew is a Jew. What makes you Jewish is how you adhere to the Torah. People that are born of a Jewish mother are Jewish, but it's only meant that you would be under the jurisdiction of Jewish law if you were living in Israel under the Sanhedrin. That's it. It just means you are subject to the Jewish law in a Jewish court. What makes someone special in the eyes of God is that you follow the mitzvot and try to make this world a better place. Anyone can follow the Torah, and we should welcome those that come. This leads me into the final reason that I left Orthodox Judaism, the politics and conversion. I've always felt that conservative Judaism's conversions are more organized than any other movement in Judaism. Reform Judaism, some rabbis don't adhere to Halakha when converting Jews, and I don't agree with that. In Orthodox Judaism, some rabbis go too far with their requirements to convert. I don't agree with how the Orthodox movement gatekeeps Judaism. You see them in the online comment section saying things like, if you didn't have an Orthodox conversion, you aren't really Jewish. This is not true at all. Conversions must be done in accordance with Jewish law. Jewish law says nothing about orthodoxy. Jewish law states that when someone wants to convert, we are to let them know the more serious laws and the punishments for violating them, and the less serious laws and the punishments for violating them. But we aren't to go too deep, lest we turn them from a good path to a bad path. 3 learned individuals test your sincerity. It doesn't say Orthodox males, and it doesn't even say they must be rabbis. It just says learned individuals. If you are a male, you should undergo circumcision or have a ritual circumcision if you're already circumcised. You are to go into a mikveh and say the blessings. Then when you come out, you're Jewish. Jewish law states that we are to convert people mi'ad, immediately. Why? Because Jewish law states convert them immediately so we don't turn someone from a good path to a bad path. All these Orthodox conversions that take years upon years to complete is not in accordance with Jewish law. The only example in the Talmud of someone converting is someone that converted under false pretenses. Rabbi Hillel converts someone under the auspices that he is made the high priest and that he is taught the entire Torah while standing on one foot. Nevertheless, Rabbi Hillel converted him. This notion that only Orthodox conversions are valid is one of the biggest myths in Judaism. This is why I prefer conservative conversions. No one disputes them. Reform accepts conservative conversions, and though many Orthodox rabbis don't, you have the Jewish law on your side. Conservative Judaism is a halakhic movement. They can say they may not like the way you converted, but they can't say it isn't in accordance with Jewish law, which ultimately matters. When it comes to Orthodox conversions, it gets way too political. You may be Jewish today, but not Jewish tomorrow. Meaning you go through an Orthodox conversion, and the rabbi who converted you is recognized by the rabbinutes in Israel. 10 years later, that rabbi has a falling out with the rabbinute, and they have taken it upon themselves to remove that rabbi from the list that are able to do conversions, and guess what? Your conversion is no longer recognized. Did you know that in 1967, I believe, there was a rabbi that converted someone, and then the rabbi fell out with the rabbinutes? The person that was converted died and was buried in a Jewish cemetery. Because the rabbi that converted him was removed from the list, they went and dug up the convert and placed him in a non-Jewish grave. There is a list called the Etim list that the rabbinute recognizes as authorized to perform conversions recognized by the Orthodox movement. So just because your rabbi is Orthodox doesn't mean his conversions will be recognized. There are only about 25 rabbis in the U.S. that is on that list. As a matter of fact, a couple years ago, there were over 200 converts that converted in Israel under the rabbinute that couldn't get their certificates of conversion. The chief rabbi refused to sign their certificates despite fulfilling all the demands. Then another issue arose when the rabbinate singled out converts for not going to services often enough. The rabbinate has taken it upon itself to determine who is Jewish and has given itself the authority, the right to nullify conversions. This is not in Jewish law. Once you are Jewish, no one can take it from you. The Orthodox movement is so political, and even if you do have an Orthodox conversion, there may be some that still question the legitimacy of the process. It trips over itself, trying to be more primitive and backwards. There is no such thing as a universal conversion accepted by everyone. Some don't accept reform conversions. Some don't accept conservative conversions. And even if you had an Orthodox conversion, there are other rabbis that may question it. The rabbinate may question it. Then there are some Jews that say you can't convert at all. You're either born into it or you're not. There's no such thing as a universal conversion. I adhere to conservative Judaism because I find it is most accurate to Jewish history and the most fulfilling. It isn't tripping over itself trying to be primitive, nor is it giving into every popular demand. In conservative Judaism, it understands it doesn't have the authority to rule on certain matters. We don't have a king nor a Sanhedrin. It allows you to make your case from a halakhic standpoint. If the argument being made is valid, it is given a vote and it becomes a ruling in the conservative movement. People have the misconception that conservative Judaism allows interfaith marriages and is similar to reform. This is not the case. It allows people to bring halakhic reasoning why something should change. For example, we talked about the role of women. Should women be allowed to become rabbis and leaders now? Well, in the past, women were regarded as property. Many couldn't read or write. They couldn't own property or have their own finances. They were seen as second-class citizens. Now, the environment has changed and women are more educated and are seen as societal equals. They can own property, read, write, etc. We should absolutely allow them to be teachers and leaders. I invite different approaches to Torah. I want to hear a male's approach to Torah. I want to hear a female's approach to Torah. I want to hear a scientific approach to Torah. I want to hear a humanistic approach to Torah. I want to hear a spiritual approach to Torah. It doesn't mean I'll always agree, but I welcome different angles and new perspectives. That is what I love about being a conservative Jew. It has the most wide range of opinion. In Orthodox, if you do something that isn't in line with the consensus or your rabbi, then you are no longer considered Orthodox. If you are not on the political left in Reform Judaism, supporting the LGBT community, being pro-choice, etc., you'll quickly find yourself isolated. Conservative Judaism allows you to have your own personal beliefs and be unique as well as being a part of something bigger than yourself. The conservative movement allows women rabbis, but there are some conservative rabbis that disagree with this ruling. Rabbi David Weiss Havlini, Rabbi Ronald Price, and Rabbi Alon Uter, who are all against the idea of females being rabbis. I love that we are able to agree to disagree while still respecting each other as Jews. If you reject the Orthodox standards, then you are no longer Orthodox. It calls into question your entire identity if you don't go along with the consensus or rabbi teaching. I want to be able to have discussions without my identity as a Jew being called into question. Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai had different perspectives on Jewish law. Rabbi Shammai was strict, while Rabbi Hillel was lenient. The two teachers were best of friends, though. The students of both had good debates, and married into each other's families. We can definitely learn from them. We are all Jews, and it doesn't matter what movement you belong to as long as you're ashamed of it. Ashamed in a sense that we shouldn't divide ourselves the way we do. Anti Semites don't care whether you are Reform, conservative, secular, Orthodox, etc. So why should we? These are my reasonings for leaving Orthodox Judaism in favor of conservative Judaism. It has a more wide range of opinions, and I value that. I've never been good at playing follow the leader, and I always felt that Orthodoxy places too much emphasis on rabbis, what they say. I have the ability to disagree with your rabbi, and it doesn't make me any less Jewish than you. And that causes issues in the Orthodox community. In the conservative movement, you're allowed to agree to disagree without your status as a Jew being called into question. There are some conservative Jews that keep kosher the same way the Orthodox does. There are some conservative Jews like myself that chooses not to drive on Shabbat. There are some conservative Jews that are very liberal leaning in terms of politics. There are some that are more right wing in terms of politics. But it's up to you. And that's what I love about conservative Judaism. You know, they say conservative Judaism is kind of the middle of the road. You have Orthodox Judaism over here, you have Reform Judaism over here, and conservative Judaism is the middle part of the road. The funny thing about the middle part of the road is it's the widest part of the road. You have more room to think for yourself. Human beings are good and excel when we reason. That's what I love about conservative Judaism. So, if you found this presentation helpful and informative, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Do me an even greater favor and subscribe to my channel. I always appreciate all the support that I am given. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Blade Talk. Be good to yourselves, be good to others, and until the next presentation, you all take care.